Thank you very much. Thank you for introducing me. So firstly, good morning, everybody. At the outset, I would like to apologize on behalf of the President of the National Advisory Ethics Committee, Jean-François Delfrécy, who wanted to be here today. But we do have a lot of different things going on today in France, so he did have to attend some appointments today. But we spoke before this seminar, and he has been keeping up to date with the different steps of the Santé publique France approach. So I'm going to try to be as brief as I can so that we have more time for questions. I'm going to set up the context to talk about the CCNE, the National Ethics Committee, to give you some ideas about its history, about how it's organized. After that, I will look at the link between the CCNE and Santé publique, and then I will finish with a few recommendations. So firstly, the history of the CCNE. I am advertising it, not myself, I'm advertising the committee, to just say that a book actually came out a few months ago called 40 Years of Bioethics in France. The National Advisory Ethics Committee is now 40 years old. And it does have, therefore, a level of depth in its discussions. It was implemented in 1983. And then it's almost 40 years to the day, actually, because it was on the 2nd of December 1983 that it was founded. This is a committee which the President of the Republic at the time, François Mitterrand, wanted to set up. And it is very much centered, and other speakers have said this, it was centered around bioethics as medical clinical ethics, with a very particular context in those years. It was right at the start of in vitro fertilization. So this ethics committee was wanted by François Mitterrand, specifically after the first birth of a baby in France called Amandine by IVF. So I wanted to just quote what François Mitterrand said when the CCNE was founded on the 2nd of December. He said that he wanted the CCNE to meet a triple expectation, which is from citizens who are looking for benchmarks in the significant innovation in science, and expectation from researchers and practitioners who feel alone in the face of the huge consequences of their work, and then from the public authorities as well, who need opinions, advice, and recommendations. So I just wanted to say, and I may just go off on a tangent a bit here, but even clinical ethics, bioethics, isn't as isolated as that. It does take place in a healthcare organization, a culture and social environment as well, which means, and the President said this at the time, it has to take into account not just the dialogue between the doctor and the patient, but also the context in which this is happening, what practitioners want, what the population want in different topics. And you can see this right now in France, actually, given these different ideas where ethics is at stake. People in France who are monitoring these topics know, for example, this debate on the end of life, which is very relevant now in France. This is really relevant to this. So it was founded 40 years ago. And what is the current organization? Well, the CCNE at the start was made up of 33 members. It now has 46, including the chairman. It has a 3-year mandate, which can be renewed once. We may come back to this later if you have any questions about the actual makeup of the committee. But what is important is that since 2021, the 6 members represent associations as well. So they have been appointed by associations. This is an important step forward because until this change, we had people who mostly represented the professionals, researchers, the different thoughts in France. There was also the legal aspect, but there was no association representatives, whereas now they are represented in the CCNE and have been since 2021. The CCNE, all of this is in the document, so I won't go into detail. It's all in the book, so I won't give you all of the details on how it works, but there are 2 main methods. Either the government asks the CCNE to work on something specific. In that case, the committee will reply with a process which is relatively long, and we do want to keep it long so that all our ideas be expressed and so that we can have debates in the CCNE as well. But then we can also work on something off our own bat, and we do that quite regularly at the CCNE as well. And just to give you a few final details about the CCNE, since 2004, there have been regional ethics areas which cover all of the regions in France now. We call them the RR, the regional school of thought areas, which are mostly set up at university hospital sites. And these regional spaces, areas, are made up as a national federation. This national conference of ethics areas has existed now since 2021. Finally, and I really want to insist on this point, in 2019, it wasn't the President of the Republic, but it was the Prime Minister at the time. He wanted to put in place a subcommittee of the CCNE called the CNPN, the National Committee for Ethics and Digital Affairs. So this committee has existed since 2019 with other members, but it is under the umbrella of the Ethics Committee. It works on not just health and digital, but digital and ethics, and is working on a few different projects, including some opinions with the CCNE. This will be changing in the coming weeks because the President of the Republic has taken the decision, Emmanuel Macron has decided to make a distinction after this pilot phase, to make a distinction between the Ethics Committee from the Ethics and Digital Committee, which will have its own environment, but the organization will still be linked to the Ethics Committee. So that will be a change in the coming weeks. Now, in terms of issuing opinions, still as part of the history of the CCNE, in the document, and it's actually quite interesting, 9 categories of opinions were suggested. I'm just going to read you the titles. There is one which is institution, one is clinical trials, legal, health economy, one is specific to end of life, one on autonomy and accountability, one on information and consent, one on membership, and one on cellular biology. So all of these are all of the opinions that have been issued since 1983, and all of them are part of these 9 categories. And there is no public health category in the CCNE. Does that mean that the CCNE is not concerned with public health? Well, explicitly, until very recently, that was the case. There was no reference to ethics and public health in the CCNE. It's actually very recently that we have seen more concern being expressed for public health explicitly in the CCNE. I will give you a few examples of how this is highlighted more recently. The first one, which may be proof of this increasing awareness. It's not just a coincidence. This is an opinion which was drawn up in 2021 during the COVID crisis. This is opinion 137. The title is Ethics and Public Health. Well, we had a public health crisis at the time. The National Ethics Advisory Committee thought that it would be important to start really thinking about ethics and public health. What I really think is interesting, including with the 2 previous presentations, is that in this opinion, you can see budding elements of things that you both spoke about as well, relating to the difference in values between clinical ethics and ethics in public health. So you can see some similar points about social justice or solidarity, the greater good, which are in this opinion 137, and this makes up basically similar points to what you presented. You can see that some of these elements, and I'm reassured by this, but some of these elements really demonstrate that we are very quickly working towards the same value positions as the ones that you have listed in the United States or in the European Union. A second opinion was also very important to remember, and this is a more recent one from the following year, opinion 140, which is called Rethinking Care Based on Ethics. So it may be a bit further for Santé publique France, but I wanted to highlight this because this opinion, it wasn't just random. In France, and I think this exists in other countries as well, we have a deep crisis in our healthcare system. This crisis existed before COVID happened in France. There were some significant problems that were expressed in the situation in hospitals in France, and this crisis continues today in our country. Of the few points and elements that I've seen internationally and in a European level, this healthcare system crisis exists in other countries as well, in Europe or beyond. The CCNE wanted to look at this crisis in hospitals to see whether there was any kind of way to rethink the health and the care system. At the time, we'd said we wanted to give this opinion on the hospital and then go further to assess the whole healthcare system. The third example, which is opinion 144, to just show you that the ethical question is very recent in CCNE, but it is gaining a lot of traction very quickly. We have a third opinion, which I believe is very much related to public health, and this was a request from the government at the time, the Minister of Health at the time, which was an opinion on obligatory vaccination for healthcare professionals. We had a situation in France whereby members of staff were vaccinated and they were obliged to do so. It was compulsory. All staff working in the healthcare world had to be vaccinated. It was an obligation. Therefore, the government required this, and the government asked us to issue an opinion with opinion 144 about this compulsory vaccination of healthcare professionals. The latest opinion, or the last opinion that I want to speak about, because it is between the CCNE and the CNPN, which I mentioned earlier, the Digital Ethics Committee. This opinion, 143, and opinion 5 from the CNPN, so you can see the CNPN is very recent based on the number of opinions it's issued, but it's on healthcare data platforms, which I think is something which, for Santé Publique France, is a very important question today and in the future. Therefore, there is growing interest for a committee which isn't dedicated to public health, but which increasingly is looking into public health issues. So now, at the CCNE, we have 4 main pillars for our work.
Now, we're having seen what was said in 1944 is increasingly present today, and now the second strand is based on societal problems. Now, public health will be part of the societal strand or axis, and we'll be able to see that others will as well be a strand which is developing upon the environment, and particularly the environment and health. And the fourth strand, or fourth axis, which connected the CPN on digital matters. Now, in this particular context, we have a body with what we call theme-based groups and permanent monitoring groups. And the permanent monitoring groups, it was decided this year to create a permanent monitoring or tracking group of public health, which is a major factor of recognition of the public health strand within the National Advisory Committee in Ethics. Now, I will try to be somewhat synthetic or concise. I'd just like to submit a few proposals in the way on the National Advisory Ethics Committee can interact and be an interface with Public Health France. And these proposals were looked at with Jean-François Papezi. There's the first proposal that Public Health France should be able to come and present the dynamics or the momentum that you've imparted within the National Advisory Ethics Committee, either within the framework of our plenary sitting once per month or during the technical section. But I think what was done for Public Health France has really been quite remarkable, and we might draw inspiration from the National Advisory Ethics Committee and other developments in other organisations. Furthermore, we're going to put into place one of the 2 coordinates was Annabelle Catulot of this permanent monitoring public health monitoring group, and we would like to invite a person from Public Health France to the work of this permanent monitoring group, and that's something perhaps we need to see with the managing director of, or the chief executive of Public Health France, to have a guest or one or several guests on a permanent basis as part of the permanent monitoring group. A third proposal now, that would be, now we can see that via what Public Health France does, and I've seen there was an invitation which was issued to other national health agencies. it would be perhaps an opportunity or useful to sort of to flesh out a meeting time, perhaps annually, between the National Advisory Committee on Ethics on the France's National Health Ages, perhaps which we're familiar with, but we want to develop our strategic thinking on. And I'll perhaps wrap up by saying that there is something which is a personal concern, and Jean-Claude gave me the opportunity to open things up as well on an information basis, because I was for almost 10 years the director of a national health school in France, National Public Health School, and listening to what has been said this morning, there's a major problem in France, which is the lack or the absence or the very low level degree of ethics training in the public health domain. This is a major issue. Now, if we want our public health professionals to develop an ethical approach, then we have to find the right form of training mechanisms. But for the short term, they are extremely underdeveloped. They are extremely precarious. We've got this would seem to me to be a warning at the bell, a warning that needs to be sent out to all higher education institutions to see how we might develop the subject of ethics in public health in terms of training. Public Health France can do some things, but it can't do everything, and there may be no other entities that need to be drawn into this process. Thank you.